The birthday banner was slightly crooked, and I remember thinking I should fix it before the guests arrived. I had straightened it twice already that morning, but the left corner kept drooping, and I'm the kind of person who notices things like that. I'm the kind of person who makes sure the napkins are folded the right way and the candles on the cake are evenly spaced and the playlist transitions smoothly from one song to the next without any awkward silence. I had spent 3 weeks planning my daughter's 6th birthday party. 3 weeks choosing between 2 shades of pink for the balloon arch, debating whether a butterfly theme or a princess theme would make her happier, finally settling on butterflies because she had told me the week before that butterflies were the most magical thing in the whole entire world, Mommy. I should have let the banner stay crooked. I should have spent those 3 weeks paying attention to something else entirely. It was a Saturday afternoon in late April, the kind of day that makes you feel like everything is exactly right. The backyard was full of people I loved. My mother was arranging the fruit skewers on the table with the precision of someone who had spent 60 years caring about fruit skewers. My father-in-law was attempting to operate the portable speaker and failing cheerfully. The kids were already running through the yard in a blur of sugar-fueled chaos, and my daughter was at the center of all of it, wearing her yellow dress with the white sash, her curls bouncing, her laugh carrying across the yard like something I wanted to bottle and keep forever. My husband was standing near the grill, holding a beer he wasn't drinking, talking to my best friend. I noticed them the way you notice something that has been in your peripheral vision for a long time. Not with alarm, not yet. Just the ordinary, comfortable awareness of a woman watching the 2 people she trusted most in the world having a conversation at her daughter's birthday party. My best friend had known me since we were 19 years old. She had held my hand when my father was sick. She had been in the delivery room when my daughter was born, the second person after my husband to hold her. And I remember thinking that day that I was the luckiest woman alive to have people like that in my corner. She was laughing at something he said. She had her head tilted slightly, the way she always did when she was really listening to someone, and I felt a small, warm thing move through my chest that I mistook for gratitude. I went inside to get the cake. My mother had made it herself, 3 tiers of vanilla butter cake with pale pink frosting and small sugar butterflies pressed along the edges, each one hand-painted in shades of yellow and orange and soft blue. I carried it out carefully, both hands underneath, moving slowly through the back door, and the yard broke into singing before I was even halfway to the table. My daughter came running. She stopped in front of the cake with her hands pressed to her cheeks and her eyes wide, and I set it down and crouched next to her and said, "Make a wish, baby," and she scrunched her face with the absolute seriousness of a child who understands that wishes matter. She blew out every candle in one breath. Everyone cheered. My husband caught my eye from across the yard and smiled at me, and I smiled back, and I thought, this is it. This is the life I built. This is everything. Then my daughter turned around to look for her father, the way she always did when something good happened, needing to make sure he saw it too, and she found him standing next to my best friend, and she said, loudly and clearly and with the cheerful innocence of a child who has no idea what she is carrying, "Daddy, did you show Aunt Rachel the hotel you were telling her about? She said she already knows what it looks like inside." The yard did not go completely silent. There were still children running somewhere near the fence, still music coming softly from the speaker my father-in-law had finally figured out. But the cluster of adults closest to us, my mother, my mother-in-law, my neighbor from 2 houses down, my husband's brother and his wife, all of them went very, very still. I stood up slowly. My best friend's face did a thing I had never seen it do before. It tried to arrange itself into something casual and landed nowhere near it. My husband's hand tightened around the beer bottle he still hadn't drunk from. "What hotel, sweetheart?" I heard my own voice say the words. They came out calm and even, the voice I used when I was reading her a bedtime story and we got to a part she didn't understand yet. My daughter was already distracted by the cake knife, reaching for it, unconcerned. "The one Daddy was on the phone about, he said it has a big pool. Aunt Rachel said it has a really pretty lobby." She looked up at me, guileless, happy, completely unaware that she had just handed me something I could not put back down. "Can we go to a hotel with a pool, Mommy? For my birthday." I looked at my husband. He looked at me. My best friend said, "Kids say the funniest things," and laughed, and the sound of it landed on me like something physical. I had known her for 17 years. I knew every register of her laugh. I knew the one she used when something was genuinely funny, loose and unguarded and loud. I knew the one she used at work events when she was performing pleasantness. I knew the one she used when she was nervous. That was the nervous one. Funny, I said. I smiled. I picked up the cake knife and began to cut slices because there were children watching and my daughter was still pulling at my sleeve asking about the pool hotel and my mother was holding out a paper plate and the party had to continue. Because I was not going to do this here. Not in front of my daughter on her birthday, not with everyone watching. I cut cake for 40 minutes. I handed out plates and refilled juice cups and helped 2 kids who had gotten frosting on their party dresses and accepted compliments about the balloon arch and the butterfly decorations and how beautiful my daughter looked. My husband moved to the other side of the yard. My best friend helped my mother collect paper plates. Everything looked completely normal from the outside. I knew because I was watching myself from the outside, some separate, hovering part of me observing the composed woman in the floral dress who was laughing at the right moments and refilling the lemonade and not falling apart. My mother-in-law came to stand beside me at the drinks table. She was a quiet woman, practical and unsentimental, and she had never in 13 years of knowing me offered me anything I hadn't asked for. She poured herself a glass of lemonade and said, without looking at me, "You're doing beautifully." She paused. "Whatever comes next, you'll do that beautifully too." I looked at her. She looked back at me steadily, and something passed between us that I couldn't name. "Thank you," I said. She nodded and walked away, and I understood that she knew. I didn't know yet exactly what she knew or how long she had known it, but I understood that I was not as alone as I felt in that moment, and I held on to that the way you hold on to something in the dark. The party ended at 5:30. My daughter fell asleep in the car on the way back from dropping the last guests off, her head against the window, still wearing her party dress, a small smear of pink frosting on her cheek. My husband carried her inside and I followed. And I put her to bed still in the dress because I didn't want to wake her. And I stood in her doorway for a long moment watching her breathe. Then I went downstairs. My husband was in the kitchen. He was standing at the sink with his back to me, and the careful stillness of his shoulders told me he had been waiting for this, that he had been dreading this all afternoon, and whatever small mercy I might have felt about that was overtaken by everything else. "Tell me about the hotel," I said. He turned around. He had the expression of a man who has spent hours preparing for a conversation and has still arrived completely unprepared. "It's not what it sounds like. She said she knows what the lobby looks like." My voice was still even. I didn't recognize it. "From the inside. My best friend knows what the inside of a hotel lobby looks like. A hotel you were talking about on the phone. Tell me what it sounds like, because I would genuinely like to know." He set down the dish towel he was holding. He said her name. My best friend's name. He said it the way you say a word when you're trying to make it mean something smaller than it is, and I watched him try, and I watched him fail. "How long?" I said. He didn't answer immediately, and that pause was its own answer. "How long?" I said again. 7 months. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something. The refrigerator made its small, constant hum. 7 months. My best friend had sat across from me at my kitchen table 7 months ago and held my hand while I cried about a miscarriage I'd had in October. And she had told me that everything happened for a reason, and that she was always there for me, and that I could call her any time, day or night, and she would pick up. I had believed her. I had believed every single word because she had been saying true things to me for 17 years and I had no framework for the alternative. 7 months. She had been at my daughter's Christmas recital in December. She had sat 2 seats down from my husband, and I had been 1 seat over, and I had glanced at them during Silent Night and felt the ordinary warmth of watching people you love exist near each other. "Get out," I said. "We need to talk about this." "We will. Tomorrow. Tonight you need to get out of this house because my daughter is upstairs asleep in her birthday dress, and I am not going to have this conversation at the volume it deserves with her 20 feet above us." I pulled open the cabinet under the kitchen island where we kept the extra phone chargers and reached past them for the folder I had put there 3 days earlier. I had not known what I was going to find when I started looking. I had only known the feeling that had been sitting in my chest for weeks like a stone I couldn't account for, and I had learned a long time ago to pay attention to feelings like that. I put the folder on the counter between us. He looked at it. He looked at me. "I've been going through the accounts," I said. "Since February. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just knew something was wrong and I couldn't figure out what it was. I opened the folder. There's a charge here for the Harlow Hotel in March. 4 nights. That's the one with the pretty lobby, I assume. There's a dinner charge at Maison in February, which is interesting because you told me you were in Cincinnati that week at the Dawson Conference. I called the Dawson Conference registration office last Thursday and confirmed that your name was not on the attendee list. I turned the page. There's a jewelry purchase in January. I've gone through every piece of jewelry I own and I don't have anything new from January, which means someone else does. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. The paper said everything. Get out. I said again. Stay at a hotel. Stay with your brother. I don't care. But you need to leave right now. He left. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after the front door closed. Then I called my best friend. She answered on the second ring, her voice carefully pitched to sound normal and surprised, and I said, "Don't," and she went quiet. 7 months, I said. He told me 7 months. Is that right? A long pause. Yes. Were you ever going to tell me? Another pause. Longer. I don't know. I had loved this woman for 17 years. I had told her things I had never told anyone else. I had trusted her with the ugliest, most unfinished parts of myself. The fears I had about being a good enough mother, the grief I felt about the miscarriage, the small loneliness that sometimes crept in at the edges of my marriage that I had never been able to fully explain. She had held all of it. She had held all of it, and then she had taken something from me anyway. I need you to not contact me, I said. Not me, not my daughter. I need that to be over. She said my name, the way she had said it 1,000 times, and I had to close my eyes. Goodbye, I said, and I hung up. I called my mother-in-law. She picked up before I'd even heard a full ring, which told me she had been waiting. I'm so sorry, she said immediately. I didn't know until 2 weeks ago. His brother told me. I've been trying to figure out what to do. How did his brother know? He saw them. In January. At the Harlow. Her voice was careful and steady, the voice of a woman who had decided to be useful in a crisis. I told him he needed to tell you. He said he would talk to my son first. A pause. Clearly that didn't happen. I need a lawyer, I said. Do you know anyone? My friend Patricia went through a divorce 4 years ago. I'll get you the name tonight. Thank you. She's a wonderful little girl, my mother-in-law said. And I understood that she was talking about my daughter, that she was telling me the thing that mattered most. Whatever happens, she's a wonderful little girl and she has a wonderful mother. I didn't cry that night. I sat on the kitchen floor for a while, which is something I had never done before, just sat on the tile with my back against the island and let myself exist in the wreckage of the day. My daughter's butterfly drawings were stuck to the refrigerator with small round magnets. The birthday banner was still up in the backyard. The cake stand was on the counter with a few crumbs left on it and a single sugar butterfly that had come loose from one of the slices and was sitting by itself at the edge. I picked up the butterfly and held it in my palm. It was orange and yellow, hand-painted by my mother, who had spent 3 days on that cake. I thought about the fact that my mother had spent 3 days making a perfect cake for a party where my husband had stood next to the woman he was sleeping with and smiled at me across the yard. I thought about how much of my life had been happening without me knowing it was happening, just beneath the surface of everything that looked fine. Then I stopped thinking about that and started making a list. I was a project manager. That was what I did for a living. I broke overwhelming things into steps and I worked the steps and I did not allow myself to catastrophize because catastrophizing was not on the project plan. I found a notepad in the kitchen drawer, and I wrote down everything I needed to do, in order, with realistic timelines. And then I made myself a cup of tea and I went to bed. My daughter woke me up at 7 the next morning by climbing onto the bed and putting her face very close to mine and whispering, "Mommy, is there any cake left?" I opened my eyes. She was still in her party dress from the night before, her curls completely unraveled by sleep, her butterfly headband somehow still miraculously on her head. She smelled like frosting and grass and the particular warm sweetness of a small child who has had a very good day. "There's a little left," I said. "Can I have it for breakfast?" "Sure," I said. Her face broke into the kind of joy that only exists at 6 years old when you are told you can have birthday cake for breakfast, and she scrambled off the bed and ran to the door and then stopped and turned around and said, "Where's Daddy?" I had thought about this. I had thought about it while I was making my list and while I was drinking my tea and in the brief windows of almost sleep during the night. Daddy is staying somewhere else for a little while, I said. But he loves you very much and you're going to see him soon. She considered this with the pragmatic acceptance of a child who takes things at face value. Okay, she said. Is there sprinkles left on the cake? I think so. Okay, she said again, satisfied, and disappeared down the hallway. I lay there for another minute and stared at the ceiling and thought, I can do this. The lawyer my mother-in-law connected me with was a small, precise woman named Patricia Holloway who wore her gray hair in a neat bun and spoke at a pace that made you feel like she had already considered every possible outcome of the conversation and ranked them by probability. She saw me 3 days after the party. She listened to everything I told her without interrupting, and when I finished she asked 3 specific questions about the accounts, about the mortgage, about my income versus my husband's, and then she sat back in her chair and said, "You're in a solid position. Let's talk about what you want." What I wanted was my daughter to grow up feeling safe. What I wanted was to not spend the next decade being angry. What I wanted was for the person I had been before the party, the woman who straightened birthday banners and made careful playlists, to eventually become someone I recognized again. What I wanted was to not look at the kitchen in the house my husband and I had bought together and feel what I felt when I looked at it now. So I told her what I wanted and she wrote it down and she said, "We'll make that happen. 14 months is a long time and also not a long time at all." I moved out with my daughter in June, into a rental house 2 neighborhoods over, a smaller house with a yellow front door and a backyard that needed work and a kitchen with old tile countertops that I immediately loved in a way I hadn't expected. My daughter decided on her first day that her room should be purple, a decision she announced with great authority while standing in the center of the empty space, and I said yes. And we painted it together on a Saturday, both of us in old t-shirts with purple hands by noon, and she told me it was the best day of her whole life, which I knew was the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old, but I held on to it anyway. My mother-in-law came over for dinner twice a month. She never said anything bad about her son in front of my daughter, and she never pretended that everything was fine when it was just the 2 of us, and she helped me put together the bookshelf in the living room and stayed for wine afterward. And I thought about how strange it was that the ending of my marriage had given me, of all things, a clearer understanding of this woman I had known for 13 years. My daughter started a new school in the fall. She made a best friend named Zoe on the 3rd day, a girl with pigtails and a loud laugh who wore mismatched socks on purpose. And I watched them run around the playground after pickup one afternoon and felt something shift slightly inside my chest. Something that had been positioned wrong for a long time beginning to settle into the right place. I won't tell you, I didn't have hard nights. I had a lot of them. Nights when my daughter was at her father's for the weekend and the house was quiet in a way that felt less like peace and more like absence, and I would sit with my tea and my list and try to keep things in their steps. Nights when I thought about my best friend, which was the hardest thing to stop doing, harder even than thinking about my husband, because the marriage had been failing slowly for years in ways I had refused to look at directly, but the friendship had felt, until the moment it didn't, entirely solid. I had been wrong about that. I had been wrong in the same way you can be wrong about a wall, trusting it to hold up the ceiling without ever checking for cracks. But here is the thing about being wrong. You can be wrong and still be okay. You can have the thing you thought was holding you up removed and discover that you were, in some fundamental way, holding yourself up all along. I had not known that about myself before. I knew it now. The divorce was finalized in October, 14 months after the birthday party. My lawyer called me on a Tuesday morning while I was in the parking lot of my daughter's school waiting to pick her up, and she told me it was done, and I sat in my car for a few minutes in the thin afternoon light and just breathed. My daughter came out of school doors in a rush of small people and spotted my car and ran toward it with her backpack bouncing. And she yanked open the door and climbed in and said, "Mommy, guess what? We learned about metamorphosis today." "Metamorphosis," I said. "Tell me." "It's when something changes completely into something different," she said, with the serious enthusiasm of a child delivering important scientific information. "Like caterpillars, they go in a cocoon, and they completely change and then they come out as a butterfly." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a drawing she had made. A fat, cheerful caterpillar on one side of the page. On the other side, a butterfly with enormous colorful wings, slightly lopsided, drawn with the confident inaccuracy of a 6-year-old who knows exactly what she means. That's beautiful, I said. My teacher said metamorphosis can be scary for the caterpillar, she said, because it doesn't know it's going to be a butterfly. It just knows something is happening. I looked at the drawing. The butterfly's wings were orange and yellow and soft blue, the same colors as the sugar butterflies on her birthday cake from a year and a half ago. That's exactly right, I said. She put the drawing back in her backpack and looked out the window with the self-satisfied expression of someone who has successfully conveyed information of great importance. Can we have pasta for dinner? Yes, I said. With the butter sauce. With the butter sauce. Yes, she said, pumping her small fist, and I laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and loose, the kind I hadn't been sure I would find my way back to. I am not going to tell you that everything is perfect now. Perfect was never the point. The yellow door needs repainting, and the backyard still needs work, and there are mornings when my daughter asks me something about her father that I don't know how to answer simply, and I take a breath and find the simplest true thing I can and offer it to her and we move on. I still think about the friendship sometimes, the 17 years of it, all the small true things we said to each other that didn't stop being true just because the last chapter was wrong. I think that's the most complicated part of grief, the way it doesn't require the whole thing to have been false. But I drive to pick up on Tuesday afternoons and the light comes through the trees in a way that's particular to October in this part of the country, golden and a little thin, and I sit in my car and I listen to whatever I want on the radio. And I think about my daughter inside that building learning about metamorphosis and making a drawing with confident, lopsided wings. Last week she asked me if we could get a caterpillar. She wants to watch it turn into a butterfly, she told me. She wants to see the whole thing. I told her yes. We'll find one in the spring. I want to see the whole thing too.